OutLaw, a KXAN investigative project unfolding all week. The Catalyst team is looking at the connection between a 50-year-old state law banning homosexual conduct and the record number of legislative proposals introduced in 2023 impacting LGBTQ plus Texans.
The debate surrounding many of these bills focused on children and families. Some passed into law, some are challenged in court, and others are bound to resurface in future sessions.
In this week's Inside the Investigations, we talk about how the past may influence the political future and the lives of thousands of Texans.
And thank you all so much for joining us here on KXAN Live this Wednesday morning. I'm Will Dupree coming to you from the KXAN Live studio for another edition of Inside the Investigations. And as always, we are here with investigative reporter Kelly Wiley. Kelly, thank you for joining us too.
Thank you for having me. This is a big day.
It is a big day. We have so much to talk about, and we have a few guests joining us here this morning too, Kelly.
Yes, this week we are joined by the Director of Investigations and Innovations, the big boss, Josh Hinkle, and Senior Investigative Producer, David Breer. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Well, we're so happy to have you here. The Catalyst Project has popped off. We're getting a lot of great reaction to it. The stories have been so compelling, and we're excited to have you here and talk about it.
Thank you for having us.
You know, Josh, this is the 6th season of Catalyst, and of course we're talking about OutLaw. This is the Catalyst project that launched this week, and it's focused on the LGBTQ plus community and the many ways that the state government is creating legislation around them. Because this project is so vast and there is so much breadth included in these reports, I just want to kind of go back to the very beginning. Where did this idea all come from? How did that all get started?
So back in 2019, we decided to launch the first Catalyst project, which was all about missing persons. The whole idea of Catalyst is to take a multi-platform approach to whatever story we're telling. We really try to focus on something that has a big systemic issue and can be told over multiple ways. So that's why you'll see like a podcast with this one, a docuseries, a big digital platform, that kind of thing. And it really started because of everything we were seeing in the legislative session this year. For this time we've done Catalyst, there were a lot of bills that were aimed at restricting the LGBTQ plus community. So the group that has traditionally worked on Catalyst sat down and talked about maybe this is the next one. How could we tell this in a unique and compelling way that would get people interested in this topic and also educate them a little bit on things that they may not already know.
And among these bills that were filed, there was one bill that would take a law off the books. And this is what we saw many of your stories focused around. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so most of the bills were things like we have seen, the performance ban, the book ban, different things like that would restrict the community. But we did see one bill that was aimed to protect the community, the LGBTQ plus community. This is a bill that has come up session after session after session for decades, and it would repeal a 50-year-old law off of the Texas Penal Code that essentially bans homosexual conduct. So back in 1973, state lawmakers decided to create this law that would ban homosexual conduct. So it criminalized gay sex and gay behavior. And it went for many years on the books, just like normal. But then in 2003, the U.S. Supreme Court actually struck it down because of a case that happened here in Texas and said that it was unconstitutional and unenforceable. So since then, Texas lawmakers have failed to actually remove it from the books for the past 20 years. And so it just sits there, and it's often misinterpreted. It's still used to discriminate sometimes because people don't understand that the law is not enforceable. So the LGBTQ plus community is still kind of bearing the things that have happened with this particular law.
And because we are focusing on, more than 100 bills that were filed just this last regular legislative session, some of those ultimately did pass both chambers and become state law. Others failed along the way. What has been the response from some of the lawmakers who authored these bills? Are they planning to perhaps bring them back up in a future session?
Well, this is just one of the bills, this homosexual conduct one, and I do know that Representative Benton Jones is very interested in refiling this one because it did pass a House committee and make it to the full chamber. It ended up dying before it could progress any further because of deadlines with the end of the legislative session. So I think that kind of progress shows that it can move forward, and maybe the next session it might be more ripe for that. But what we've seen with the other reporters who are working on supplemental stories to this project is that many of the lawmakers did not want to talk about this story, even though we reached out for weeks trying to email, call, even do door knocks, and many of them just didn't want to say anything about it. So if they would like to talk with us about some of the things that we have had in these stories, we would love to hear more from them about that. And one of the questions we do have is, will you refile some of these bills that were unsuccessful this past year, the ones that many believe are aimed to restrict the LGBTQ plus communities? Some lawmakers did give us statements, and they really just kind of bolster the points that they were making during the legislative session, whereas many of these bills were focused on what they have said was faith and family values.
Yeah, that invitation stands for ever. If they would like to come and talk to us, we would appreciate that.
Yes.
Our team, every time these stories have been coming up at 5 and 6, we've all been turning up the TV and listening to them. And I'm not from Texas, but several of our investigators are. And I feel like as we've been watching, some of us have been genuinely surprised at the history of all of this. And it kind of reminds you why recording things and why we need to understand kind of our past to understand moving forward. But I can only imagine the amount of research that went into this. David, a question for you. Where did you and Josh start with trying to understand all that's happened leading up to this? Talk to us about the research.
Yeah, my hat's off to Josh. I really think he did the bulk of the research on this project. So thank you, Josh. But to get to where it started, we went all the way back to 1860, and that's when the state had the first sodomy law that we could find. So it's been a law on the books outlawing sodomy for over 100 years. You go forward to 1973, the state legislature did a big overhaul of the criminal code, and that was 50 years ago. And at that time, they created a new law that was, it was a sodomy law, but it was aimed specifically at LGBTQ plus, the homosexual community, and so, and homosexual sex, essentially. So, and we know at that time it was controversial as well because there was opposition to it, and we report that in the story. And so it had opposition then. Like Josh said, over the decades, there have been numerous laws filed. And there was a lot of research that Josh and all of us did, kind of looking into who filed them, who opposed them, what came up in the legislature. There's a lot of history to this law, and it's been opposed at pretty much every step along the way. And then, like Josh said, it went up to the Supreme Court when it was challenged by a gay couple in Houston who were arrested in their apartment during a private moment, and that overturned the law, essentially rendering it unconstitutional and unenforceable. But as we found, doing lots of research and talking to lots of people, it has still been used, even though it shouldn't have been.
And I want to jump in here real quick because even though this is a very serious topic, it was kind of fun to put together because we're having to piece together all of these decades of evidence along the way. And it's not just as easy as like, hey, let's go shoot video at the Capitol here in 2023. Sometimes we are having to literally go into like these archives where I've got pictures I showed David when I went over to the Senate Media Services archive, when it's like this old crumbly book that kind of makes a noise when you open it up and everything to find photos of what happened in 1973 with those particular lawmakers that put this law in effect, and going back and listening to that audio archive. And a lot of that, I really have to give kudos to our photojournalist and editor Richie Bose, because when you have that kind of evidence that's not just visually presented, you have to get very creative to make sure that people are still understanding what's happening in a compelling way. David is also not talking about some of the biggest research that he did. I think maybe he's being a little modest, but this year we really looked into the group who has opposed this bill the most, Texas Values. It's a conservative faith and family-based group, and David did a great job of really backgrounding that group from a campaign finance level to figuring out where all of its endorsements have gone, to figure out what the influence behind this is. This group has come up more times than any other person or any other group in the entire 50 years of this law being tried to repeal it. Because they want to keep it on the books. And I think David did a really good job of letting people understand what's the motivation behind that and how are they actually able to accomplish that and keep it on the books and really be that voice of opposition.
Let you know that it's not just enough for the history to be sitting there. Someone's got to take a critical eye and kind of string it together. And you guys have certainly done that. There's so much more to this project that's going to be airing through the week. The podcast is amazing. You should definitely be listening to that on your way to work. If you have a big vacation coming up, make sure that that's on your playlist. But it is that time when we're going to show you what you can expect from the Investigates team this week. We have a sneak peek. Watch here.
Online now, OutLaw, the digital investigation. Watch the full docuseries and explore our interactive elements on a half-century criminalizing LGBTQ+ Texans. Check out additional stories on the record number of legislative policies and proposals impacting your community. And listen to a new season of our Catalyst podcast, taking a closer look at our team's personal and professional experiences shaping this report. It's all online now at kxan.com/outlaw.
And I just want to thank our guests this morning, Josh Hinkle and David Barrere, for coming in and talking about the Outlaw Catalyst Project. This is a massive team effort. Josh, remind us how many contributors are a part of this project?
I think there were almost 40, and you were one of them, Will. So I really have to thank you. To the story that you put together and told airs today at 5 o'clock on KXAN, and you can also see it on KXAN.com. But Will, you've been one of the great journalists who've worked on this. It's been a privilege to work with that many people on this project, and I must say many of the people on this project, including myself, are members of the LGBTQ+ community. So it does hit close to home, but we wanted to make sure that we were covering this in a fair and accurate and objective way. So that's why you have to listen to the podcast and why you need to go and explore what we're presenting on digital, because we really explain how we reported this and made sure that we were doing it in a journalistic way and not something that was advocacy or bias.
Absolutely. Well, Josh Hinkle, David Barrere, thank you again for being here, and I hope everybody goes check out the dozens of reports that are a part of this project, the docuseries, and the podcast. It doesn't just stop there. So we appreciate you being here again, and we appreciate all the work that you've done this far.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm Will Dupree. That is Kelly Wiley. Kelly, thank you again for being here. We'll see you back here next week.
See you then.
All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Take care.